A cavalry pistol weighing over 4.5 pounds, hanging off a saddle because no belt would carry it, and the pouch it sat in was already called a hiding place. That's what the word means. Holster, from the Old English holster, concealment. A hiding place. Same root as haul and hull and hole. The word is older than the United States by about a century. And here's where most people get this wrong. For roughly 300 years, the object did the exact opposite of what its name said. It rode on a horse in the open, then on a hip in the open, under a buttoned flap that kept a revolver dry and hid it from nobody at all. What finally changed that wasn't a gunfight. Follow the word back, and it doesn't start with guns. Heolster in Old English, heolster before that. It meant a covering, a place where something was kept out of sight. The cognates run right across Northern Europe. Holster in Old Norse, holster in Middle Dutch, heolster in German. Sheath, case, cover. It shows up in English records around the middle of the 17th century. By the 1660s, it is narrowed to one meaning, a leather case for a pistol. Think about the arithmetic there. That's more than a century before the Declaration of Independence, before there was a United States, before there was a Colt, before anyone had built a revolver a man could wear on his belt. English speakers already had a word for the thing that would hold one, and the word they used meant hiding place. They weren't wrong about what they wanted. They were early. The first object anybody called a holster wasn't worn by a man at all. Picture the front of a saddle, not the seat, the raised horn at the front, the pommel. Slung across it, one on each side, a pair of leather pouches, each holding a pistol. That's the original. Pommel holsters. They developed through the 1830s for a plain reason. The pistols of that period were too big to carry any other way. Samuel Colt patented the Patterson in 1836, and the guns that followed got larger before they got smaller. These weren't sidearms in the sense anybody uses the word now. They were equipment. They belonged to the horse the way a saddlebag belonged to the horse, which produces a situation worth sitting with. A man rode into a settlement armed. He tied up outside, stepped down, walked in, and the second his boots hit the ground, he wasn't armed anymore. His gun was 40 feet behind him on an animal in a pouch named for hiding that was hiding nothing. It came off the horse the moment it got light enough to. By the 1850s, the gun is on the belt, and the shape it takes is the one on the left of your screen. A pouch with a flap over the top, buttoned or strapped down, covering the whole gun from the muzzle to the top of the grip. Civilian makers copied it off the military, and the reason was weather. A revolver of that era was an open mechanism full of small parts, and a day of rain or a week of dust would foul it into a paperweight. The flap kept water out. It kept grit out. It kept the gun in place when a horse changed its mind. Now here's the thing most people get backwards. It's easy to assume concealment arrived with the 20th century. It didn't. People had been hiding pistols for as long as there had been pistols small enough to hide coat pocket, vest pocket, a sash, the waistband of a pair of trousers. That was ordinary. The trick nobody had managed was doing both at once. You could hide your gun or you could holster it, not both. And a fair caution, since we've leaned on that word, its Northern European cousins lean toward case and sheath. Covering is solid ground. Reading intent into it goes a step past the record. So if hiding wasn't the point, what were 2 generations of American leather workers racing to do instead? Stay with me for the part where it flips. There's a specific stretch of years where the whole job of this object changes, and it doesn't happen in a gunfight. It happens on a sidewalk. Subscribe, and I'll get you there. Speed. That's the answer, and the West spent 50 years chasing it. The flap goes first. What replaces it is the California pattern, the Slim Jim, if you've heard it called that. Lighter stock, Cut close to the profile of the gun, open at the top, the grip frame standing clear. It's a beautiful piece of reduction, and part of it isn't design at all. It's scarcity. Buckles, studs, snaps, rivets. Hardware was thin on the ground west of the Mississippi, and a maker who couldn't get it built something that didn't need it. Necessity turned into a look, the way it usually does. Then the Mexican loop, which runs through the last 2 decades of the 1800s and well into the 1900s. A wide skirt of leather behind the pouch, slits cut into it, the pouch threaded back through the slits. No hardware anywhere. Handsome as anything ever hung on a belt. And heavy. That's the part photographs never tell you. It's a broad slab of tooled hide riding on one hip, and by the end of a hot afternoon a man knows exactly where it is. 50 years of refinement, better leather, faster access, less bulk. And through every year of it, the gun sat out in the open where anyone could see it, in a thing called a hiding place. What changed that wasn't a gunfight. It was a sidewalk. The Texas Rangers had spent the 19th century on horseback in open country. By the early 1900s, a great deal of that work had moved into towns, paved streets, storefronts, banks, crowds, and a man who walked into a bank in Austin looking like he'd ridden in off the frontier was a problem before he opened his mouth. The gun had to disappear, not from the belt, from view. That's the flip, and it's the whole story of this object in 4 words. It stopped protecting and started hiding. A W. Brill shop in Austin got there first. Lighter leather. The gun riding higher, tucked up under the arm instead of hanging down the thigh. The skirt behind it trimmed back and streamlined until it stopped printing a shape of its own through cloth. Then El Paso finished the job. From 1925, S.D. Myers was advertising the pattern that carries Tom Three-Person's name, with the skirt gone entirely, a stripped scabbard riding high and canted forward, and a coat buttoned over the top of it. Whether Three-Persons designed that holster or the Myers shop designed it and put his name on the catalog is genuinely disputed. Sources split. There's a royalty arrangement from around 1930 that nobody has ever fully explained. Take the name as a label, not a signature. But the object had arrived. 2.5 centuries after English speakers started calling it a hiding place, it finally hid something, and nobody made a speech about it. No patent fight, no headline. A man walked past you on a street in Texas, and you didn't know. It took another 30 years for the country to notice this object at all. When it did, it got it backwards. 1958, 2 garages in Southern California, and as far as anyone can tell, neither man had the faintest idea the other existed. In one of them, Arvo Ohala was building holsters for the studios. He'd filed his patent in August of 1956. It came through in April of 1958. Low on the thigh, tied down, lined with metal. It was engineered for a camera, and at that job, it was superb. That's the silhouette that ended up in front of 100 million people, the shape you picture when somebody says the word cowboy. In the other garage, John Bianchi made his first leather holster. One of those men designed the holster everybody can picture. The other started the company that put a holster on everybody's belt. Bianchi went into business with a man named Neil Perkins. They founded Safari Limited together, split later, and the 2 halves became the 2 biggest names in American gun leather. That's a United States story specifically. The industry took a different shape elsewhere. Which garage is on your hip right now? Almost certainly not the famous one. A 4th threat shows up in 1972, and it isn't weather, and it isn't being seen. The story as it's told, and it comes from the firearms press rather than any formal record, so hold it loosely, is that an FBI agent named Bill Rogers was in a physical struggle with a suspect, and his revolver came out of his leather holster. Not taken. It simply left. The holster had done what leather does when a fight goes to the ground. It gave. What Rogers built afterward was made of Kydex, a thermoplastic that Rome and Haas had developed back in 1965 for aircraft interiors, and that nobody had thought to put a gun in. It didn't stretch. It didn't tear. It held its shape under a man's full weight. By the early 1980s, that work had become the Model 070 for Safariland, which the company still describes as the first true duty retention holster on the market. Here the numbers get slippery, so let me say plainly what's known and what isn't. Different sources put the share of officers killed with their own weapon at 8 to 10%, or around 12, or around 20, depending on the decade and on exactly what's being counted. Those aren't the same claim, and anyone who quotes one of them as settled is overstating it. What isn't in dispute is that it happened often enough to redesign an industry around. Picture what that does to the object. For 300 years, a holster had to survive weather. Now it had to survive a person. And there is still today no government standard and no industry standard for what Level 3 actually means. The last move is the shortest, and it's the one that completes the sentence. The gun goes inside the waistband, not on the belt, behind it, against the body, between cloth and skin. What turned that from a specialist choice into a mass-market object was American law changing. As of 2026, 29 states allow carry without a permit, a count specific to the United States and specific to that date, so check it against the year you're watching this. Vermont never required one at all. Alaska was the first to pass it in 2003. 16 states moved between 2021 and 2024. Whatever anybody thinks about any of that, the manufacturing consequence isn't arguable. A few 100,000 customers became a few million, and the industry followed them into thin, molded, and invisible. The guns dragged the leather along, too. Once a light on the front of a pistol became standard, every holster had to be cut around one. Picture a man at a gas pump on a Tuesday morning. Coat, jeans, coffee. He's armed. You can't tell. Nobody else at that pump can tell. And the object making that true is a sheet of plastic heated over a mold in somebody's shop, descended in a straight line from a pouch tied to a saddle in 1836. The trade that cut the old ones didn't die. It stopped being local. There's a flap holster in a museum case somewhere near you. Black leather gone hard, stitching still tight, the flap buttoned down over a revolver that isn't hiding from anybody and hasn't needed to in 150 years. It did its job. It kept the rain out. It just never got to be the thing it was called. A few hundred miles from that case, copper patterns cut in El Paso before 1931 are still being traced onto hide in a working shop by a man who cuts to the line by hand. And somewhere between the two, at a counter, close enough to touch, stands a man carrying a gun you will never see. 260 years for a word to catch up with a thing. Now the holster in your safe, leather or plastic, and more to the point, whose hands did it come from? And is it still holding the gun it was cut for? Tell me in the comments if you want more history like this. Subscribe.